Welcome to Beyond the Briefing. I'm Shannon Marvell. Overlooking the River Ness, the old High Church has stood at the heart of Inverness for centuries, steeped in Highland history, Jacobite connections, and even Outlander fame. Now, the landmark faces an uncertain future. A community group, Save the Old High Inverness, is leading a campaign to buy and transform the building into a public space for culture and heritage, but it depends on raising enough support before time runs out. And with me today is Val Sweeney, who will be running the interview. So tell me what interested you about the story, Val.
Well, I think everybody in Inverness knows this building. It's a magnet for tourists. It stands in a prominent position overlooking the River Ness. It's the city's oldest church building, and yet its future is very uncertain at the moment. It was put on the market by the Church of Scotland. A sale was agreed. That sale fell through in November. And so a group of campaigners were interested in buying it for the community and now exploring whether that is possible. So we're speaking to Thomas Pragg and Chris Lucock, who are among the people that have launched the Save Old High Inverness campaign. Tell me, what makes the building so important or special to the city?
I think people forget that the Old High Church is not only much older than most people realise, but it's kind of been the civic centre of Inverness for longer than the townhouses existed, much longer. And it was the place where everything in the city happened, basically, for centuries. So that's one reason. It's really important to the history of Inverness that we keep this going.
Obviously, there's a lot of history there, starting with St. Columba coming up here to preach to the Picts and being given this site by King Bruder. Probably a site, if you think about it, so King Bruder could keep watch on him from down in Great Pantrick. But also later, of course, it's where they kept the Jacobite prisoners after Culloden and shot quite a lot of them in the graveyard. And it has that sort of resonance, I think, in historical terms, and not just for Inverness, not just for the Highlands, but nationally, and also for expatriate Highlanders overseas. They really feel that connection. And as a newcomer to Inverness myself, I felt it's a way of actually understanding the city, in a way of actually stand there. There's a real building, it's a real place, beautiful situation above the river. It's got real stones, real monuments inside it, which can bring the place to life. You can feel this is really about Inverness, this is about the Highlands, and you feel more at home.
So really it's integral to the whole history of Inverness. If the walls could speak, it would tell lots of stories.
But it's pivotal, isn't it? The other end of Church Street being the castle, as it was before it was turned into a court, and now it's going to become a castle again. And in the other direction, of course, the monastery. So, and between times, all the commercial premises along Church Street and back into all the vens and so forth around Inverness, it was really the beating heart of the town.
I think the other thing to remind ourselves is that Inverness has relatively little left of its early history, and yet we get loads of visitors coming more and more every year, and that's not a story that's easily told. The Old High tells it very well, but otherwise, what have we got? There is Havertard House, and there is Dunbar Hospital, and all quite close by the Old High, thankfully. And across the river, Balmain House and so on. So there's these buildings, but none of them really tell the story. The townhouse might become something of the sort, but it's relatively recent. It's really only been there since late Victorian times. So that's the other thing. Inverness needs to tell its story, and this could be a way of doing it.
If the story of the Old High is to continue, how do you see the next chapter for the building itself? What could it be used for, do you think?
It's got enormous potential, obviously, as a performance space. It's got the Willis organ in there, which was kitted out or refitted out a few years ago for £200,000, which is twice the amount they're actually asking for the whole building now. I'm told that they used to have lunchtime concerts there that were very well attended. I'm told that the acoustics are very good in the building. And we do need a medium-sized performance space in Inverness anyway, which a purpose it could serve. Visitors, guided visitors, very often, are we allowed to mention Outlander? And it does attract an awful lot of people here to come and have a look at the church. And certainly with the number of cruise ships coming into Invergordon, with the visitors who will be coming now to have a look at the castle when it's opened later in the year, let's hope. There's going to be a lot of people who will want to look at other things in Inverness as well. So it will become a destination in its own right. They're not just coming to look at Nessie and Culloden. They will actually come to Inverness in its own right. And it deserves that as well. It's entitled to have that attraction.
We've had a massive range of ideas. We've got spreadsheets full of them. We won't give you them all, but there are some pretty extraordinary ones from, introducing a Day of Death in Inverness, as they have in many other countries. It was a fairly off-the-wall idea, but there are countless uses for that building. The real question is, how do you make them pay enough to make the building survive, if you like, and how much do you mess around with the inside, and which some of us are pretty keen to see it stay pretty well as it is.
Couple of the things that we want to link into, there's some very interesting family memorials in there, and very nice. There's some lovely stained glass. There was some stained glass, I think, put up in the 1920s by the minister, and he dedicated it to his son, who just died. I think he was only about 11 or 12. On one side of the apse, there's a beautiful stained glass window of St. George and the Dragon. Absolutely lovely. And then later, in tribute to the minister, when he died, they put up another one opposite. And it's lovely monuments like that throughout the building.
Before you get to any of that, though, there's the question of raising the money, a target of raising £100,000. That it sounds ambitious.
Well, we've got some very active younger folk within the team that's on the board. So, for example, Mari Jarvi has been getting some very generous offers of promotional material if we have auctions or events and so forth. We're also obviously approaching funding agencies. We've had support, quite considerable support, from the Architectural Heritage Fund. So we're developing some feasibility studies so that we can develop these ideas in more detail to put to funding agencies. Lengthy timescales, so we're slightly on a timescale that we've got to work to.
Are we talking weeks, months?
We don't really know, because the church hasn't really told us what timescale it's working to, but we would guess that they will want to move quite fast. They've already been let down once by one potential purchaser, and the session is having to meet quite considerable costs going on. So we assume that we're on a tight timescale, but we don't know exactly what it would be.
There's not a specific. We haven't decided what we'll bid, how much we would bid to buy the building. That's just what the Church of Scotland have suggested. It might be more. We don't know. But we have to have some kind of a target out there to aim for. And there are all kinds of pockets to pick. It's just how quickly you can pick them. And that's probably the difficulty with this bit of the fundraising. And it's not the end of the story. Because it's not just, if we pay, just say, 100,000 for the building, as soon as we take ownership, we are committed to all the running costs, the insurance, the heating, the repairs, the whatever else there is, I can't remember, but it's thousands every month. And then there's a third stage of fundraising, which is, what are we going to do to develop it? And that's probably millions.
You talk about, ultimately it could take millions to achieve what you want to achieve. Are the public convinced, you taking the public with you?
Everybody we've spoken to is very positive and can see the sense of it. Raising the funds and getting the ideas together and everything else is a little bit more difficult. I think one of the things people forget about a thing like this is that for a community group to buy something of this sort and raise the funds for it is a complex and long process. If you're a private buyer, basically you've only got your bank and yourself to convince. So you can make a decision very quickly. That's not so easy for us. So we hope we have enough time to do that, and we hope we can raise enough money so that, and then I think people will get excited.
We've got an awful lot of people who said, yeah, we would like to get on board once it's worth being on board, but until we actually are very confident that we've bought the building, it's very difficult. We'd be asking people to make promises and assumptions, then we'd be letting them down, and we really don't want to be in that situation. That would be very unfair to the local community.
Obviously, though, the pair of you're very committed and feel very passionately about saving the building for community use. And Thomas, I was going to ask you about your connections with the old, how you've known the building for a long time. Is there, does it hold any special attraction for you? Any particular part of the building which?
I don't know about a particular part of the building. You can look back in the archives of the Courier and you'll find an article where I was asked, what's my favourite building in Inverness? And this is probably 20, 30 years ago. And I said the Old High, which wasn't very fashionable at the time because it sits there rather a bit sort of shy, isn't it? It's not a dramatic building, but it's got immense character about it. I don't know how to put it that way. So firstly, I fell in love with its position and its modest looks, but telling a story. And I love it, and I've got pictures of it and so on. And then I did go inside it. I've sung in there in choirs and things like that. And I used to go in with the council wearing my robes and all the rest of it for the kirking of the council. And I think if there is a particular bit about it, it's the layout of the inside of the church. It's a typical Scottish church of its period, which is laid out where effectively the congregation sits around the minister, and it's not this long nave of people. It's cozy. It's got and the pews are very much part of that. So I'm hope we will say. So if you want me to say which is my favourite bit, apart from the organ, which is fantastic. There are not many like that. It's just the shape of the inside of the building, the atmosphere of the inside of the building.
Yeah. And if I can come to you, Chris.
Yes, that's just given me a very good idea for a TikTok, which will be Thomas singing somewhere outside the building. We might think of lining that one up.
You haven't heard me sing.
Well, we might have to mute it slightly.
TikTok store in the making.
I'll sing inside.
So yes, Chris, you've got to know the building more recently then, and perhaps you could explain how you became involved in the campaign to try and save it, and why. Why is the Old House special to you?
Well, it's probably partly my professional background because I was a town planner and we had to deal with things like listed buildings in the past. And although everybody said, oh, you go out and protect all these buildings and everything's big, there's actually relatively few. And those that we have got, we really ought to protect and cherish, but not in sort of pickle them in aspect. They've got to have a future and they've got to have an important purpose going forward. And that's the sort of thing that interests me professionally. How can we repurpose a really wonderful building going forward into the future? I'm not sure that something like maybe a strip club would be appropriate in there as a former church building. I think you can't be too choosy about these things. If somebody wants to invest something and wants to put the money in properly, there's an awful lot of uses that could be put in the church potentially. I somehow doubt that. I think they're going to have something of a difficulty to make it really fly, though, because part of the attraction of the building is the fact that it has been and clearly will continue to look like a former church. And if they lose the character entirely, depending on what they do, then that would spoil it.
Right, Chris, if it's a good sympathetic use and it's still telling the story, that's fine. My worry about a private commercial buyer is that doesn't necessarily last very long. Once a private commercial buyer has it, they can sell it and on to somebody else, and you've lost control.
And I suppose as well with a community buyout, even though it is no longer being used as a place of worship, it is still continuing that story that the building is being used for the people.
And sorry, just to add, it could still be used on occasion for religious services. There's a way of doing that. So you have to hold 6. So for example, you could do the kirking of the council there again. You could do special events. You could still, if you wanted to, and other people wanted to. So it could stay very much as it is, but just be alive and breathing again.
You've been listening to Beyond the Briefing, the stories behind the headlines, diving deeper into the biggest local stories in the Highlands. This podcast is brought to you by Highland News and Media. It's hosted by Shannon Marvell and produced by Christopher Dixon. If you enjoyed this show, make sure to subscribe and share with others who care about local journalism.